Welcome to the Deal by Me podcast, where we ask guests to tell us your story. Hello there, this is Dr. James W. Smith, your host. We seek to transform lives by encouraging and inspiring. Someone encouraged and inspired this host, a former lawyer, gambler, inmate, and his life was transformed. The same can happen to you. So when you listen to any of the Deal by Me podcasts, please support this podcast with a donation or a monthly recurring amount for as little as $3. If you're viewing on any of the podcasts on YouTube, please subscribe to my YouTube channel. To supporters of this podcast, I just want to say thank you. Check out my encouraging, inspiring, and transforming books. I'm available for speaking engagements, in-person and virtual seminars, so please contact me through my website, www.dealbyme.com. I have with me Lindsay Shannon, whose spiritual awakening was preceded by a lot of struggle with things like depression, self-doubt, and heartbreak. But once she started doing all the soul work and seeking out alternative modalities of healing, she couldn't get enough. And she says that she still can't get enough. What an awesome guest we have today. And I'm thrilled to have her come and share with this podcast today. Um, Lindsay, Lindsay, would you share with listeners of this podcast a little bit about yourself and where you are located as we're doing this interview?
Sure. Thank you for having me. So my name is Lindsay Shannon. I'm based in the Teton Mountains. I'm in Idaho, and I am a Reiki practitioner. I'm a spiritual mentor in the sense that I give intuitive and psychic guidance, and I'm also a medium, so I can connect to loved ones that have passed and give readings that way.
Okay, well, thank you. I want to let you know that I am very intrigued by your story. Uh, I've read it, and I must admit there are quite a few things that I have to ask you to explain
Sure.
and to share with listeners of this podcast, because there are some things I don't really understand, and I know listeners may not understand it, but you were such a great guest until I wanted you to be able to share what you do with listeners of this podcast. So I want to begin just by asking you, you've gone through obviously a spiritual journey. So can you share with uh, others what you've learned as you have made this journey?
Sure. I think that's a big question. There's a lot of different pieces that fit in there, but um, I think a big part of it was kind of coming back to my true, authentic self and being able to express myself in a way that I felt was reflective of who I wanted to be to the world. For quite a while, I was kind of stuck in a job that I didn't like. I was in a city that I didn't like. I was in a relationship that I didn't like. And not only that I didn't like, but they were not healthy for me. And I think through this spiritual journey and exploring alternative modalities of healing, it's sort of opened my mind to different possibilities, to different people and different relationships, different dynamics. And I think just finding my voice through all of that and feeling confident in what I have to say and what I have to offer the world has been a really huge takeaway, and something that I want to, help inspire other people to do, because I think everybody is more than capable of
Hmm.
doing that.
Well, I like that, and I'm very curious about this spiritual journey because I've gone through one, and many of the listeners of this podcast I know have gone through the same thing, and that's the reason they look at or listen to my podcast is because they want to be encouraged, inspired, and hopefully transformed based upon all that has perhaps happened in their lives. So that I'm curious to ask you, what was your spiritual awakening like? Because you obviously went through one to get to where you are now. And I'm always curious about that when I have guests on the podcast, because most people don't get to where they are without having to go through something. And so yours was a spiritual awakening. So could you tell us what it was really like?
Yeah. I think the trigger for that was a very toxic relationship. And it kind of started clicking, all these dynamics and all these things that I was allowing in my life to just continue happening. Um, and one day I just kind of, I don't know, it's hard to explain, I think, as I'm sure you can relate to, but
Mhm.
I feel like my senses kind of opened up. Like I said, I'm clairvoyant and clairaudient. I have these, senses that I use to do my readings, and those started opening up, and I think they started causing a curiosity in me, just to sort of explore, what exactly is there to this world that we are a part of, and is there more, and in what way? So I think, you know, my my mentality started opening up, but also these other senses that, kind of switched on this curiosity and led me towards like getting into things that I was really curious in and really enjoyed, and kind of got back to that, you hear people talk about their inner child all the time. It got back to like a childlike state where I was just in flow and really enjoying life. And I think, as soon as you have a taste of that, it's kind of hard to let go. You want more of it. You know what I mean?
Mhm. Mhm. I know exactly what you're saying. You have gone through a lot, as I said earlier, in order to get to where you are. I know that's what you had to do. What are some things that you were doing? Because guests, uh, listeners of this podcast would want to know what what was it? Were you in an abusive relationship? Were you an alcoholic? Did you have drug problems? Uh, I know that you said something about depression and self doubt and heartbreak. Are those some of the things that you were going through that caused you to get to where you are?
Yeah, for sure. I think like the job that I had, really just the entire situation, it caused me to drink probably almost every day.
Mm-hmm.
I would drink to go to sleep, and caffeine, coffee to wake up, which is a terrible cycle. I think my body suffered because of that. I was having like rashes and breakouts that just didn't make any kind of sense. I think in that regard, like my body was rebelling, or at the very least kind of reflecting what kind of turmoil was going on the inside. My relationship was, I I believe it to be emotionally and verbally abusive. Yes.
Mm-hmm.
There was a lot of, gaslighting. People have these trigger words or terms, but I was made to feel crazy in that relationship. And I think, like I said before, like that was why it was such a huge deal, because being that so bogged down for so long. I mean, it wasn't a terribly long relationship, but it was over 2 years. And I think that's a long time to kind of live in this mental state where you feel hopeless in a lot of ways. Um,
Hmm.
yeah,
Excuse me.
sure.
Um, One of the things that I like about your story is that you seems to be so forthright. And I'm going to ask you relatively personal question. I hope you don't mind. Uh, is this relationship one of marriage or it was one of boyfriend, girlfriend kind of living together relationship?
It was a boyfriend relationship. We were not married, nor engaged. I think something inside me knew that I shouldn't go that far with
Mhm.
it.
Okay.
I definitely consciously did not know
Okay.
that, but yeah, we never lived together. And honestly, I think friends thought that was odd because, 2 years is a good chunk of time.
I,
But something stopped me.
I got you. I understand exactly where you're coming from. One of the things I need to ask you, you say in your bio or your profile that I am a psyche medium,
Yes.
Ricky energy healer, and spiritual mentor. Now, I think I understand the psyche medium, and I think I understand spiritual mentor, but I'm not sure if I know exactly how Ricky energy works. Could you
Sure.
tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, absolutely. So, Reiki is this idea that there's a life force energy that kind of flows through all things. I think all living things, right? So like consciousness, but not just humans, plants, animals, anything that, we tend to feel kind of connected to naturally. And when I, when you get attuned to Reiki, they call in the energy and um, basically flood your aura and being with this healing energy to sort of um, get accustomed to it and know what it feels like and know what it can do. And then so in practice, what I do is I basically get, people make sure they're comfortable and everything. And I get into a meditative state with them and we we exchange energy in the sense that I call in the Reiki, I act as a channel. So, you know, when I'm doing my work, none of my energy, my personal energy, if you will, gets transferred. It's literally just me acting as a channel for this healing to come through, this good intention to come through. And um, if if you do it in person, people tend to put their hands on the body, so like shoulders, head, kind of like you would, if a kid is hurt, you go, oh, okay, are you all right? Like there's
Mhm.
like something healing about that touch. And then you can also do it distant too, so that's a little more abstract, but there's energy all around us, and so basically I tap into the energy grid or whatever you want to call it, however
Okay,
people think about it, um, and send the healing energy that
okay,
way.
okay. Does that have any spiritual um, connectivity to it?
Like religion wise, you mean?
Yes.
It's Japanese
Okay.
medicine,
Okay.
yeah. So it's quite old actually, but it's always kind of used in tandem with Western medicine. So like you'll see Reiki practitioners at hospitals. And I think a lot of it is, you know, we work within the aura, but also the physical body a little bit too. And I think it helps to sort of calm your whole state a little bit
Mm.
better and then kind of facilitates physical healing
Oh,
that
okay.
way.
Okay. That's very interesting and
Is that something you think that you
very
would be interested in?
I'm not sure yet. And it's very informing. I honest with you, I had never heard of it before, and to listen to you share is very awakening, and it's very interesting. I
Yeah, I mean, it's not for everybody, that's for
yeah,
sure.
yeah. I note that in your profile also that you talked about how you had a lot of struggle with things like depression, self-doubt, and heartbreak. I am a minister and retired from the pastorate. Wanted to start this podcast to continue my ministry, and I wanted to do something, like that would be very encouraging to listeners, inspiring, and hopefully transforming. And so every guest that I've had on, I've had them on because I thought that they could share something along that line to listeners of this podcast. And you are a perfect guest, and I like the fact that I've asked you to be on this podcast. So, if a listener is going through some of the same things, excuse me, that you have gone through, struggling with depression, self doubt, heartbreak, what would you say to them that would be, encouraging, inspiring, and hopefully transforming?
I would say kind of the overarching or like thread, the through line for those. I kind of always had this thought of like, it's got to be better. Like, there's got to be something more, right? Like, this
Mm,
can't be it. I can't be depressed forever. I can't be heartbroken forever.
mm,
I can't be unsure of myself forever. So, like, what is that going to look like? And I
mm,
think I would have these glimmers of like, okay, well, maybe this would be awesome. Or, I would daydream and be like, if only life could look like this. I
mm,
think I would just advise people to like trust that feeling and really try and find the courage to go for that. Whatever that may be, if it's wanting to make more friends, it doesn't have to be like going out every day. It can be getting online and seeing who's like out and about, on social
mhm,
media, or
mhm,
just kind of feed your interest, feed your curiosity, and just trust that feeling, because if you start to trust that feeling, it'll start to grow, and then your emotions start to shift,
mm,
and your confidence starts to shift, and you can continue to trust those positive feelings over time, because I know that's a big part of depression, is getting in that spiral of you don't feel like you can trust those positive feelings because they don't stay very long,
mm,
but they will, if you kind of indulge yourself a little bit in your interests and your intrigues and curiosities. Feed
mm.
your inner child.
Well
They're
said.
worth it.
Well said. Well said. I appreciate you sharing that. Listeners of this podcast would appreciate hearing that, I'm certain. Listeners, please don't go any place. We have a little bit more we want to ask of Lindsay. So before I come back, I want to ask Lindsay Shannon to share with you uh, information on a book that she may have, a website, anything that will help you be able to locate her and find her and see what she is doing that may be a benefit to you. Shannon, Lindsay, would you tell us that?
Absolutely. So my brand is called Ineffable Alchemy. I can spell it if you think that would be helpful.
That would be helpful.
Okay, it's INEFFABLE, Ineffable, and then Alchemy, ALCHEMY. I can explain that if you would like to, but
Please do.
so I'm Ineffable Alchemy on Instagram, Facebook, and www.ineffablealchemy.com. You can book with me there. I have mentorship programs available, and one-on-one readings, whatever you see fit. But yeah, the brand Ineffable is more or less defined as something that cannot be defined. something that's really hard to explain or translate to the tangible. And alchemy is the process of creating and, seemingly magical transformation. So I made the brand in the terms of the spiritual awakenings that we go through are pretty intangible, right? But like very valuable and seemingly magic and important. So
Okay. Thank you so much for sharing that with listeners of this podcast. And I know listeners will be interested in knowing a little bit about you.
yeah.
A little further questions that I want to just ask you about. Can you tell us how your mediumship reading works? And first of all, could you just kind of talk about that and explain it? Because you are giving words and matters that a little difficult and matters that we have not heard in this portion of the country. For instance, mediumship reading. It, when you say what it is, we probably say, "Oh, that's that." You know what I mean? So,
Sure.
could you kind of talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, absolutely. So mediumship readings are where I connect with the spirits of loved ones that have passed in order to kind of create closure or connection and just reassure people that their loved ones are watching them from the beyond.
Okay.
Yeah, it's really interesting. There are, different ways I get information. I see things with my third eye, kind of like a dream or like a daydream. I'll hear things kind of like you would get a song stuck in your head. They'll tell me things that way. But really it's just to find connection and reassure people that, the people that they loved in this life haven't just up and left them. They're watching over them in some way that maybe we can't really fathom, being human, but yeah, they'll deliver messages and reinforcement and whatever I think the sitter is needing to hear at that time tends to come up during our conversations.
Oh, interesting. You are very intriguing and amazing. Uh, you really are. And I guess I'm so intrigued because so much of what you're doing, it, I never heard of it in that way. You know, when you just mentioned about the mediumship reading, we probably would refer to that more like having a grief session. You
Okay.
understand what I'm saying? Something to that nature. So, and it's very interesting how you would do this. How that makes the connection, uh, and it's interesting. So I don't know what to say except it's very interesting, and I'm excited to just be able to talk to you about it. Uh,
Thank you. Do you
do,
use it in your practice at all? Like, do you connect with like
I
ancestors or anything?
Yeah, we will do it more like maybe going to the hospital or somebody has deceased. As a pastor, we will go, maybe lay hands on them and pray for them, and and ask God's blessings upon them. You know, it's a little different concept, but your concept, I understand it, especially when you said it was more of a Japanese kind of understanding, and that makes it different. That I had never heard of it. Many listeners perhaps never heard of it, but that's what this podcast is all about. We want not only encourage, inspire, and hopefully transform, but let listeners learn something they had not learned before. And
Absolutely.
that's what makes it good. That's what makes it good. You have also obviously lots of abilities. I'm feeling that as I talk with you. You know, what you do is just awesome, and it must be kind of tiring, or uh how should I say it? It wears on you. Maybe that's the word I could use.
I see.
Uh,
Yeah, I see what you're saying.
yeah. So how do you, you know, do you have to turn your abilities on and off? You know, you know what you're doing look like it would drain you. That's the word I want to use. It does not drain you at all.
It doesn't typically drain me, only because I think, it's kind of serving a bigger purpose, right? To like help people and deliver messages that they need so deeply to hear, for healing purposes. I think, the idea of me, like my body or my mind or my heart and soul, whatever you want to call it, acting as a channel for these other energies to kind of come through and communicate, is definitely a foreign one to most. I mean, it was to me at the beginning, so I don't expect that to make perfect sense to everyone.
Mm-hmm.
But really, I just kind of, get in the zone and let what needs to come through, without thinking about things too much. Usually, like if I have some, like a grandmother or somebody that's trying to convey a lot of love, I do typically elicit a lot of emotion. Like I'll cry, or feel my heart beating, but it's never a bad thing. And usually when our session ends, that kind of, I'm relieved of all of that pretty immediately. So I wouldn't say it's draining. I definitely feel like I get a lot out of it in helping people, but preparing for it, I think, is probably more work than like actually like the act of doing it, if that makes sense.
Sure. Yeah, makes lots of sense. So how do you protect yourself energetically, and how do you recommend others do so?
It depends on the day. I have a few different tools. I like to burn sage. I'm kind of a ritualistic in that way. I like schedules, or like kind of standardizing the process a little bit. So I'll burn sage to kind of like have that smell get me, ready to get in the zone. And then um I'll grab like either crystals or a notebook, or anything else that I feel like will help. And I'll sit and meditate before I meet with anybody, and just kind of ask for, love and guidance from my guides, from their guides, from our ancestors, past loved ones, and just sort of do a visualization of this like protective white light,
Mm.
or bubble, however you want to picture it. But I typically recommend people do visualizations, because I am kind of the belief that anything we can imagine is real. So if you're using your mind to protect your heart, I think that, and so it is if you do. So my main thing is the visualization. If you can envision somewhere safe and comfortable, that usually does the trick. It kind of calms your body down enough to be able to receive,
Mm.
and communicate.
Wow. Wow. Well, Lindsay, thank you so very much for sharing with listeners of this podcast.
Of course.
You've been really, I would say, intriguing. Shared a lot of knowledge and a lot that I didn't know. And certain listeners of this podcast uh, don't know, but hearing how you talk about it is very empowering. And so, thank you again.
Thank
Uh,
you.
and so, there you have it, Lindsay Shannon, sharing with us today, who says that her purpose here in this lifetime is to lovingly guide you as you come to know your own power. What an awesome story interview. And until next time, peace and blessings be with each of you.